Thank you for joining us today. My name is Allison Ban, and I'm the Executive Director at SPARC, a Center for Social Research Innovation. Welcome to today's SPARC Talk, Security Options for Sensitive Data with our own Lily Wang. I'd like us to begin by giving honor and thanks to the Haudenosaunee and Anishinaabe nations as the traditional inhabitants of the lands where McMaster stands. To say that is to acknowledge a debt to those who were here before us and to recognize our responsibility to respect and honor the intimate relationship that Indigenous peoples have to this land. Lily Wang is the manager of SEAL, the secure data lab at SPARC that is accessible to researchers from around the globe for storing and accessing sensitive data. Lily is dedicated to promoting awareness of accessible and secure environments for research. Before coming to McMaster, they worked at the Brock Digital Scholarship Lab. You can reach out to Lily at seal@mcmaster.ca. Thank you so much for joining us today, Lily.
Thank you so much for having me. All right, let's get started. I'm going to share screens. Let me know if you are able to see it. How's that? Okay. So thank you for joining me today, and thank you, Allison, for the introduction. So we're going to be talking about security options for sensitive data available to us at McMaster, and I'm going to be talking about SEAL quite a bit. So today we're going to cover, one second. Okay. Today we will talk about different types of data and how we classify sensitive data, what that really means, and why we have to protect it. Then we'll talk about the ways that we're doing it right now, how we can do it better, and then I'll go over some of our options that researchers have in terms of data storage, data access, and then we'll touch a bit more about SEAL and why that might be the solution for you. So SEAL deals with sensitive data storage and access. So technically we're a data enclave or a virtual data lab. What that means is that not only can you store data in it, you can also analyze the data within our environment. So we are available to research at all levels, and you can access it remotely from off campus via our MobiKey system or locally in our lab here at L.R. Wilson. So we are proud of our strong security and administrative access controls. You could say. We'll talk more about that later, but for now, so what is sensitive data? So here on this table, anything that's considered confidential or restricted is sensitive or highly sensitive, and you can hear these terms kind of interchangeably. So yeah, so if you have public data, that's data that can be freely used or reused, redistributed. A lot of times, some examples are like animal taxonomy, because that is not a sensitive subject. And then so the impact on loss or distribution is low. When we get into our confidential data that poses a risk of identifying the participants or organizations. So that includes personally identifiable information, education records for participants, stuff like census data. And if you lose it or if it gets disseminated, it might be hard to get access again. You might put the participants at risk. Then you have restricted data, which is data protected under law or data protected under contract. So if you lose it, it's stolen, it's significant harm to the participant groups, researcher, even the university potentially. So that's your personal health information, which includes, personal health information includes like your health card number, your medical history, any payments associated with that, your credit card information, obviously very personal. So I want to give an example on how, like, I want to give an example on how it's kind of different types of sensitivity on the wine quality data set that I mentioned in public. So if you talk about wine quality and you talk about, say you have a list of wines and then they're de-identified. So you don't have a name, you don't have a winery. All you have is like the color of the wine and the amount of tannins in it and something like that. So that would be considered more public data. Then as soon as you get into having winery information, the wine name, growing regions, growing conditions, the breakdown of the types of grapes in there, it becomes confidential. And then when you get administrative data, financial situation of the wineries, identifiable information on their workers, on their, I think is the term, then, or like the process in which it's created, then it becomes restricted. And so there's a lot of nuance there. And if you have information and you're unsure, I encourage you to reach out to us or to RDM. Isaac Pratt is the research specialist at Mills at the Sherman Center. So thank you for this information also. So why do we care? Why do we care that our data is secure? So kind of three prongs to this: availability of access. So for a lot of data holders, proving that you are able to securely store the data is the only way they will give it to you. So in order for you to do your research, you need to have a plan for data security. Another aspect of that is funding. So the Digital Research Alliance requires people to have a data management plan in order to provide funding.
That's true.
SHRC required, my bad. SHRC. And so that's that. And then there's researcher liability. So if you are keeping your data on a flash drive on your personal device and you lose it, you don't have any access available, you don't have any way to get it back, then you've lost your research, you've lost your data. That's bad. Also, if you lose your physical storage devices, then somebody else can have it and you have no control on that anymore. No control on dissemination, on who gets to see it. And the last aspect, I think, is social responsibility, which sensitive data should be secured to protect the people and groups being researched. That's just basic. Like in the end, we all want everyone to stay happy and healthy. And to that end, you want to like prevent over researching as well. You don't want vulnerable groups to be pulled over and over again. So they get embittered and they don't want to work with researchers anymore. So having secure data storage could make it reusable. So you don't need to do that. So what are some of the best practices in storage? I know you can kind of see the watermark, but if you have any ideas, feel free to shout them out, I guess.
Limited access.
Limited access.
Yeah, only people have access to the room who are like vetted to be there, I guess.
Yeah, for sure. Absolutely. And anything else? I can't see the chat right now, so I don't know.
Oh,
There's
maybe like encryption, like technological things as well.
That definitely for sure. You can, you can cheat. You can see it. You can kind of see it in the background there. Okay. So yeah, so all of those and more. So like you said, authenticated access. So only people who should have the access are able to log into it or go to it physically. Oh,
Danica mentions having a good system for roles and responsibilities.
yes, and that's under administrative controls there as well. So, and also the data usage policy, having a clear policy, everybody knows what their roles and responsibilities are, is very important because you can't do something unless you understand it. And then we get into multi-factor authentication. So if you're logging into your computer on your phone and you're logging into your computer and Microsoft is like, put in the code. That's what multi-factor authentication is. in a physical lab, there could be access logging and there could be auditing of which files you have access to. Encryption, like Meg said, there's lots of different kinds of encryption. So if you're remote, there's like packet encryption, end-to-end encryption, and then there's also encryption of the data itself, where you need to have a password to work with the data. We have secure networks, so you have to make sure your antivirus and firewall are up to date because you're only as secure as the network you're on. Definitely backups for in case you lose it, you don't lose it forever. Fires exist and they're bad.
The newest recommendation is 3 backups with at least 1 in a separate location.
Yes, 3 backups, at least 1 remote. Yeah. And I wanted to touch on the principle of least privilege. It's an information security term, which means that every user only has access to the specific data or resources or applications that they need, and no more than that. It seems kind of obvious, but it's harder to do in practice because it could be tempting to send a whole zip file to someone instead of like going through it and looking for each one. Yeah. So these are some best practices, and we'll talk about some forms of data security, and then we'll relate back to some best practices. So there's kind of four main types of secure data. So you got your local storage, your physical devices, your laptops, desktops, hard drives. So they're easy to use. You have access to them all the time, and they're low cost, but they're also insecure. You can be lost or stolen. So it's good for public data. So if you have public data or low risk data, local storage is okay. Then you have network storage, for example, the social science server, SOCSI server, but you cannot put data, sensitive data on the SOCSI server. It includes, so department servers, ArchPCS has network storage, and NAS devices, so network attached storage. It's basically like a hard drive attached to your network. So it is secure as your network is, and it's centralized. So a lot of people, many people can use it at the same time. A lot of people have access to it. The risks are that your analysis is still occurring on your personal computer. You still have to download that data. You still have to work with it. And there's records that remain on your computer. So you have to remember to delete it at the very least. Cloud storage, some examples are Google Drive or Mac Drive, Azure, AWS, Dropbox. There's a lot of cloud storage, and not all of it is good and not all of it is bad. So the benefits of cloud storage is that you get version control, you get remote access anywhere you have internet. So there's the same issue of it becoming local access when you download the data to work with it. So that's going to be the case. And again, it's only as secure as the network that the cloud storage is on. And sometimes the security policy for these places can be obfuscated. Yeah, because who really owns that data, and who has access to the data that you put on the cloud? Another one that people don't normally think about is that like Azure and AWS, while they're very secure, they charge for pulls. So if you have a large data set, it could become very expensive very quickly, especially if you're deleting your data when you're done with it and re-downloading it when you need to work with it again. Which brings us to virtual data labs and data enclaves like Seal. You can also build these environments in Azure and AWS, but they are time intensive and expensive. So you have all the benefits of network storage with the ability to analyze data within the environment. So you don't have to download any of the data on your personal device, and you can still do it collaboratively. It is, I think, the most secure option, but it can be pretty expensive compared to local storage, at least. McMaster data finder here. It can help you determine which option is best for you for your data. So we discussed data types, so medium data, or let's just select medium for now. And then there's active research. So if you're performing analysis on your data in the environment, backup or sharing, and if you're collaborating. So this has very useful ways to delineate the access. And then your options here on this side, for example, your GitHub, which is good. GitHub is nice, but you don't want to be putting like sensitive information on the public GitHub. Mac Drive or Mac Drive encrypted is great for data sharing, but you can't work in it. Then you have, RHPCS is another thing that you can use. You can talk to them about individual solutions, and they have backups and servers for storage. And then you have us at Seal. So if you select, say you have highly sensitive information and you want to do active research on it, if you're working with other researchers, and it just shows you which options you have. So Seal here, I'm a little focused on Seal for obvious reasons. It says that, you can, a mobile device, that's interesting. Here's like remote access, and it removes Seal as an option, but you can definitely access Seal remotely. Oh, here. And so that's that. This is developed by friends at RDM, and thank you very much for it. It's a very useful tool. So this is just some more information on the different options you have and what kind of storage it is. We pretty much covered all of it, so I'll just move on. I want to shift now to talking about Seal kind of as an example of secure data access and kind of to brag. So So these are just some of the security features we have at Seal. If you remember some of our best practices, we have our physical controls, technical controls, and administrative controls. Physically, access is only for people who should have access, vetted researchers and like that. They have keycard access. There's a camera to make sure that only authorized people are getting in. And in a kind of physical and technical way, all the computers for use in Seal are thin clients to access our VMs. So the same concept of no data gets transferred to a physical device still exists. And we talked about encryption. We have keystroke and image encryption for our MobiKey devices. So when you're operating Seal remotely, all of your packets are encrypted, so you're immune to man-in-the-middle attacks, they're called. We have these multi-factor authentication, and we're not connected directly to the internet, which stops a lot of network-based attacks. Then we have administrative controls, try to operate using the principle of least privilege, where researchers only have access to the data sets that they applied for or should have access to, as well as the devices or the host computers that they don't have access to every host computer. So we are able to do logging on new users, see who logged in and when. If we're asked to, we could see what they access, but it's not something that I would do for fun. And we respect the researchers' security and privacy as well, obviously. Any questions about this or anything else so far? Sorry, yes.
I have two questions actually.
Yes.
I don't know what it means to have a thin client.
Oh.
And also about the vetting of research output. If you could explain those a little bit more.
Yeah, for sure. So a thin client is a computer that is basically just so you know what a virtual computer is, a virtual machine is. It's basically just an access point to a virtual machine. It doesn't have its own brains in that regard.
Yeah, it's a computer without a brain.
It
Okay,
doesn't have processing power. It doesn't have a,
okay, cool.
and output vetting, research output. So we want to make sure that all the output that comes out of the lab is at the very least de-identified. Any other areas of risk we will talk about during intake, and we'll make sure that those standards are met when researchers try to take data out. A lot of that is making sure that like sample sizes aren't too small or cell sizes and stuff like that.
And it's a mix of both CL's own requirements and then the requirements of whoever owns the data.
Yes, that's true. Yeah, we work very closely with the data owners and the researchers. Sometimes they're both, and that's great to make sure that all of their needs are being met. Yeah. So we talk about some other services that we provide. I just wanted to give a little more information on how CL operates. Again, I just wanted to mention that we are this storage and analysis space. So to that end, we have software for analysis. We have in vivos, data, SAS. Anything you need, you can absolutely ask us and we can get it for you. So we'll work very closely with the researchers on that. And we help liaison between data owners and researchers. We communicate needs. We talk about solutions to make sure that everyone's needs are respected. Then again, our security features are what they are. We offer support for ethics approvals, grant applications, if you need us to help you with any documentation, if you need more details on our security for applications, we can help you with that. And some of our data sets, we have food bank administrative data from Hamilton, we have the OUAC data, some census data, and more. You know, if you have questions, obviously feel free to ask.
OUAC is Ontario University Admissions.
OUAC is University, Ontario University Admissions. You'd just assume that everybody. Thank you. We good so far? All right. Anything that, okay. Yep, okay. And then just lastly, I kind of want to walk you through a project workflow. The text is small and I apologize. So here's a typical workflow of a project in SEAL. So a researcher will approach us and they will be like, we would like to work with this data that you have, or they want to bring in their own data. And then so we'll help broker an agreement with the data owner if they haven't already on the terms of that access. Then if the data is not already in SEAL, it'll be transferred in securely, FTP. Then we will work with the researcher to make that data research ready. That means cleaning. It means cleaning data dictionaries and documentation. So then we give the approved researchers access. So the researcher that brought the data to us and their team. So the process of vetting a researcher, we make sure that the researcher is legitimate for sure. And then there's ethics, and non-disclosure and lots of forms to sign. So then the researchers work on their data from anywhere, in the lab, from anywhere. Remote access via the MobiKey system or within the lab itself to perform analysis. And then when they are ready to output their data, they just send us a request, say, hey, I have my data here, my output here. And we will review the results, make sure it's like de-identified and make sure that it meets all of the requirements of the data owner and of ourselves. And then that is released to the researcher for publications. If they need to make edits, they can come back to the lab and we'll go through the vetting and release procedures again. And Then if the data owner wishes it, the data is destroyed. If they don't, we keep it so it can be reused. And research output is kept for 5-10 years. So everybody, if you need it later, you can come back and get it. And that's pretty much all I had.
Why don't you talk about this idea of being able to access it from anywhere in the world and the technology that allows for that?
Oh, for sure. Absolutely. So I mentioned the MobiKey system a couple of times, but I never really explained what it was. Our computers can be accessed remotely with this USB dongle. It's called a MobiKey. And what it is you can plug it into your computer, and as long as you have internet access, you can access the Seal app. It's basically a VM that runs off of the key itself. Once you plug it in, the encrypted service on the key gets your password. So that's your first layer of authentication. All of those packets get sent to root 1 or partner, and then sent to Seal, where you have to log in again. That's your multi-factor authentication to your Seal credentials. And yeah, as long as you have internet access, you are able to use the Seal app.
Well, I think the interesting thing, and this is where it can get a little confusing for people, because Seal is not connected to the internet.
Yes.
This is creating essentially I always think of it as like a leapfrog into this completely secure, non-internet enabled environment via
Yes.
an internet platform with our partner Root 1.
Yes, for sure. What Allison said. It's very interesting, the technology behind it. There's actually, I read a paper about it recently. The ports behind, I won't share it, but the technology behind how the keys work. And so we aren't connected to the internet normally. So you're not going to be able to look at your emails or browse Reddit. You're doing research with us. Yeah. But are there any questions?
So question is, can somebody use the space only to store their data for themselves?
So the question is, can anybody use the space just to store data? And absolutely, you don't have to work with the data to store the data in our space. Yeah.
So only they can utilize the security feature that, it's a safe place to keep the data.
It's definitely, yes. Yeah.
I think sometimes you run into the cost and benefit where if you're not going to be using your data, if you just need a place to store it, there are other secure places to store it that are likely more cost effective.
Agreed.
Just a question about accessibility of
Yes.
this. I would assume for McMaster faculty, staff, students, how about accessibility to people outside of that circle? Is it free? Is there a cost? Is it allowed? How does that work?
So there's definitely costs associated with it, but yeah. So researchers externally are definitely able to use Seal for their projects. In fact, we have quite a few researchers from all over the world. We have people from France, people in the States and in Australia who are working with us right now. I think the difference is like tax.
Maybe you can talk a little bit about kind of how fees work and the setup of that.
Sure. So there is a licensing fee for the MobiKeys for remote access. And so that is a yearly fee. And then there's also a yearly fee for the data sets. Depending on the data set you use, we'll charge a different amount of money. Anywhere between, I think, depends on the data set. So $1,000 to $5,000, $8,000. It really depends. If you are bringing in your own data, we will discuss fees. For the first year or two, it'll just be the MobiKey fee. Yeah, so purchase the MobiKeys from us, Seal access, data sets, MobiKey licenses. And any software that you want to use that requires a license, that fee gets passed on to the researcher as well.
And so data owners don't.
Yeah, so data owners don't pay to have their data in Seal. And that's because we want to make it more attractive so that people are willing to reuse data.
So it's only people coming to analyze data, their own or somebody else's, that are subject to the fees.
Correct. Or storage, but again, better option.
If somebody places data for their own usage, they don't want anybody else to use it, but they want to place it securely. Again, you think the cost benefit wouldn't be in their favor?
I think if they are part of McMaster or a similar university, there are other options that are free or virtually free. The reason that Seal costs money to people is that you have active people working to make sure that the security is happening, working to vet the researchers, working to look at every output coming out of Seal. And so the level of person time and the level of technology infrastructure to maintain this means that it's never going to be a free service.
So which means to say that we, as a target group of customers, we cannot target those who are using a cloud service, and we can tell them that, you know, we can give you similar service, but more secure.
It's a completely different proposition. I mean, look, I'll stop talking about this. I think the slide that you had that looked at kind of what different things accomplish.
Yes.
Cloud storage is a fabulous thing for when you're storing. The challenge is that as soon as you need to analyze it, you need to put it into a software. It's on your personal computer, and therefore it's got all kinds of vulnerabilities.
If you're just storing it, you don't need to pull it. Then you don't, like Allison said, you don't need the manpower of Seal. You don't need the eyes on the data.
I'm interested in the data storage after analysis is done.
Yes.
The ability to have it be used by others.
Yeah.
Like, do you have open data practices? Does MAC have an open data policy? Do you know anything about that? Like, how does this work with Seal?
Maybe Allison can speak to that.
Yes, and I'll also invite Isaac or Danica if you have anything to say about that. So I think MAC is all for open data. I don't know if there's an official policy. We're starting to see this more and more with really sensitive data sets, that in the name of research data management, in the name for journals of requiring that data be available for any publications that are going out in those journals, you're seeing more and more sort of issues around what is the accessibility of the data itself. And what has come to be determined is for restricted or confidential data can be in a completely secure location. And journal data editors are actually paying to get into secure data enclaves in order to be able to replicate the data to know that the articles are true. And so we are starting to see this becoming part of the culture of research, where people are like, oh, okay, we have to actually protect this data, and we need to figure out how to be able to balance that with open access and be sure that other people absolutely can access that data, but not in a way that's casual about the security of the people that the data is about.
So something like Seal would be perfect for that.
And we have that. That's sort of a key feature of this, that anything that we're starting to see more collaborations of researchers, where the food bank data set is a good example of this.
Yes, for sure.
Where somebody has been, is doing a paper about what's happening with poverty and food needs in Hamilton. And then somebody else is reading that paper and getting really interested in it. And so then they reach out, they get vetted, they get access to the data, and they're able to then add on to the research that somebody else did.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I can add a little bit and back up Allison, that we don't have a open data sharing policy, and even the tri-agencies are not necessarily asking everyone to deposit data, but like Allison said, it's part of a larger conversation of reproducibility and also, building on each other's research. And so we do have an RDM strategy and are able to support researchers in doing that work. And thanks, Lily, for a really great presentation.
Thanks. Yeah, I think any other comments, suggestions? Sorry, cut you off. I'm good. I'm good. And I'm gonna be around if you have any more questions. Well, thank you for joining me today then. Thank you everyone for attending, and thank you for the lovely questions.